Hi, Henry Kissinger. How are you doing? By the way, he's not a happy camper with me, and neither is the circle of friends. I've interfered with the economic benefit to Halliburton, Bechtel, Clayton Homes, Spring Homes. Now, who's that? Halliburton, you know who that is, Dick Cheney, right? Spring Homes, that's Rumsfeld through Carlisle. And Warren Buffett is Clayton Homes. And what's the other one? Halliburton? Bechtel, I got that right. Bechtel is the Bush family. Just quickly, I was contacted by a sheriff or sheriff's deputy in New Orleans after Katrina because they were losing people in those FEMA trailers. He saw my work on the web, and there you'll see some of it right here in front of you. It's called Gassing America. Of course, Patricia was excited when I suggested Auschwitz America. But I was contacted by this deputy sheriff, and he said, Dr. Rogers, and I told him to wash his mouth out again. I just said, call me Mr. Rogers, because in the past, when I was in that profession, it was a reasonably honorable profession back in the 60s and 70s, right? But after the 70s, medicine was hijacked. But anyway, so as a whistleblower, you know what they do to your curriculum vitae and your history of employment, your licensing and all of that. They all vaporize. So I told this sheriff, I'm happy to be just Mr. because now I'm at your level and I can have the integrity that I always hoped to have. See, what's the oath that a doctor or a medical professional takes? You know, this is a paraphrase. Hippocratic oath. First, do no harm. Well, in the 70s, there was a shift, and it was first make the money. It went from mercy to mercenary. And I and a lot of my fellows bagged it. You know, when the church sold off LDS and primary, many of us took a walk. In fact, I complained to Elder Hinckley at the time. I said, why did you sell the name along with the facility? Of course, there was so much pressure to maintain the name. So when you go up to LDS or primary, who do you think you are getting medical care from? LDS Church? Is that making this noise? LDS Hospital and Primary Children no longer are affiliated with the church. So it's now about making money rather than really saving your life. I mean, I'm shooting myself in the head when I say that in front of that camera. But it's no longer a faith-driven operation. But many of us left because we could feel the spirit change. But our intelligence didn't leave. And when this sheriff deputy called me from New Orleans, he said, Dr. Rogers, would you mind coming down? Would you mind coming down here and help us identify the cause of death and injury in these FEMA trailers? I told him I would be honored, and I borrowed more money and went to New Orleans. I was only going to be there 3 days to testify in a congressional committee. But as I got there and I testified in that committee, I ended up staying in New Orleans and Mississippi, Louisiana, the Gulf Coast area. Is this licorice? Ooh, wow. Okay, kill it a little bit. I used to work on sound systems too, helped pay my education. But I went down there, and as I testified in this congressional committee meeting that was being held there in New Orleans, I was explaining to them why their people were dying in these FEMA trailers. Two things were wrong with the FEMA trailers. You only got to hear one in the news. The first thing that was wrong was that these 4 companies owned by these 4 elites, they didn't go to Weyerhaeuser or to Boise Cascade to get the materials. They went to China. So tell me about the safety of the products coming out of China. And by the way, it's not the Chinese fault. It's the American businessmen going down there and saying, produce this, but don't worry about safety standards because you don't have any, and it's not American made. Anyway, so the particle board, the flake board, and all that material that went into those FEMA trailers was produced in China. So it was extremely toxic with formaldehyde and the other solvents. They put those units together here, of course, and then put those disposable families in New Orleans into the FEMA trailers. And within days, the babies were ill. Within weeks, many were dead. Elderly or the housebound were dying. So I explained to them it is the formaldehyde that was the original material, but one more problem that they had not figured out at all. Anytime you burn any carbon-based fuel, that's natural gas, propane, oil, coal, wood, you produce, number 1, carbon dioxide, which everybody's been worried about. Number 2, carbon monoxide. Let me say it again, carbon monoxide. And its companion gas always. Now, I know you're not scientists, all scientists, but I'm going to say carbon monoxide, it's CO. The next gas is H2OC. Now, what is H2O? But when you combine a carbon with it, guess what you have? Formaldehyde. Anytime you run your cook stove, you're producing carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and formaldehyde. A few other gases too. So here's these poor families put into these Katrina trailers. The people in New Orleans and in the Gulf Coast are normally accustomed to heating with electricity. They cook on electric, they heat with electric. Very rare is there natural gas or propane or anything used down there like that. Now all of a sudden, FEMA brings these little camp trailers down there with a cook stove and an oven inside, a furnace also in there. Now these people are using gas, propane primarily. But they're using a cook stove inside of what? A tiny box. If you run your camp stove inside your camper all day long, what's going to happen to you and your kids? And the longer you run it, the less oxygen's available, more carbon dioxide relative to the burn. Is there a blind spot here? So, this is for every person in America. You've never been told that using your gas stove is damaging your health. Do you think Questar wants me to tell you that? But when you run a cook stove, you're producing carbon dioxide, of course, carbon monoxide, and formaldehyde. And by the way to tell whether there's carbon monoxide and formaldehyde being produced, look for a little yellow flicker. So here are these people put into these FEMA trailers, and no one ever tells them that that's a problem. Many of them are sick and many of them dying, and they go to their doctor. Guess what they're told? You want to guess? Post-traumatic stress syndrome. Heart disease, asthma, chronic fatigue. And by the way, chronic fatigue is a gold mine, isn't it? If you've got chronic fatigue, I'm going to medicate you forever. Oh, yeah, if you're depressed. Now what do I get to do to you? Put you on an SSRI. Prozac. Has Prozac ever fixed anybody? Okay. Sorry to get off the sidetrack. But you have medicine that has been covering up all these poisoning events. So when these families found out the truth, they begged me to stay there. And instead of being there in 3 days, that I was only go there and testify, expose the thing, go home. I had to keep pushing my flight back week after week, out to 8 weeks. By the way, those black families in New Orleans, they love me for 2 reasons. For saving their lives and their children's lives, but also because there was an organization that was right there on the ready, providing them with food, water, and clothing. Now, what organization am I talking about? What people are prepared to help other people? So when they found out I was from Utah and a Mormon, they said, "We love you already." So I really applaud the brethren and the church leadership for that great service that they provide, because now there are a lot of those people looking at us in a different way. We're not those crazy polygamists anymore. Also, I tell them we are also patriots. By the way, when I was staying there and I was sleeping with these families in a sleeping bag most of the time, whether their houses were shambles or not, we were there together. After they had been offended by the federal government with the removal of what protection? Remember what happened? What did they do in New Orleans? The National Guard came in and did. What did they do? They collected all their weapons. And then all the gangsters came down and started to give these people problem. When I was there later, everybody was rearmed. And I felt safer with those people than I ever felt with anybody. And I'm talking about African Americans with this white guy in the middle.
I'm sorry, but
Oh, it's the time out?
No, not quite yet. 5 to 6 minutes if you can. We're just
Okay. We're running behind. Oh. Well, anyway, what got me into the eyesights of this sheriff's deputy, and I can't see you, I can see figures out here, but what got me into the eyesight of this sheriff's deputy was my work on the manufactured mobile homes. If you just remember this website, gassingamerica.com. How many of you have internet? Good. Someone you know is affected by this issue directly, but everybody is affected by the betrayal of medicine. My mother and father were serving a mission down in Zuni, New Mexico. They were living in a church-owned mobile home. My father, who used to run the mechanical systems at the Desert Gym, he understood combustion, carbon monoxide. One day he called me up from the mission and he said, Tom, I think I can smell exhaust in this trailer where Mom and I are staying on our mission. I said, have you examined the furnace, the water heater, the dryer that they were lucky to have? No problem. He'd done a smoke test. That's a legitimate test. Found nothing wrong with those units. But he said, I can still smell exhaust in here. And I said, well, maybe you parked the car too close to the trailer, let it warm up, with the door open into the trailer. He said, yeah, maybe that was it. Didn't think anything more about it. A couple of days later, Brother Peiwa called me. He's the LDS patriarch. He said, Tom, your mom and dad are in the hospital in Holbrook. And I said, what's wrong? He said, well, they both apparently suffered a heart attack in the same hour. I said, that's kind of weird. But I couldn't go down there and challenge him, so we all accepted that. My mother and father got better in the hospital. They were sent back to their trailer. They got sick again back went back and forth a dozen times or more. The church ended up spending close to $100,000 to treat my mother and dad for heart disease. But when the weather got better, their heart disease went away too. So we never thought anything more about that until February 10 of 2008. Family in Manti called me. They knew I'd saved the Tabernacle Organist family from losing a baby. The wife was a member of the choir at one time, I believe. Associate of the choir, anyway. So they contacted me. They said, the state's going to take away our baby. They're accusing us of abuse and neglect. I gave them advice, but then in a couple of days, I was able to see their baby. I don't know if it showed up yet. That baby right there. I saw that baby in Primary Children's Hospital. When I looked at the baby, I said, this is not abuse or neglect. This is a poisoning case. I didn't know precisely, but within a few days, I was able to go down to their home. I was looking for a business that was, sending smoke the wrong way. And only by the Spirit was I inspired to look up at the roof of their trailer, and I noticed 3 pipes. One was the furnace exhaust, one was the water heater exhaust in this particular floor plan, and another third pipe sitting there, a rather big one. And I said, what the heck is that? By chance, I went down the street to another unit like theirs, because they were still in the hospital. I couldn't get in theirs. I saw this other unit, driven by the Spirit. It's the only thing I can explain. I knock on the door. This woman opens the door. She has a handkerchief full of blood next to her nose. She looks at me, and I look at her, and we're saying, "What? We know each other." The lady that opened this door was Sister Dean, who used to take my reports when I was working at LDS on poisonings. And she said, "Tom, what are you doing down here?" And I said, "Well, I'm trying to identify the cause of this family's problem in your ward." And I said, "Why have you got this handkerchief full of blood?" She says, "I've been sick all winter long. Nobody can figure out why." And I said, "Come with me." I took her out to the back side of her trailer, mobile or double wide. I said, "Look up at your roof." She said, "Oh, yeah, those pipes." I said, "Do you know what they are?" She said, "Well, I know that's the pipe for my furnace. That's my water heater. What's that third pipe?" And then, just driven by the Spirit, I said, "I think that's your bloody nose." We went inside. I pulled the cover off of her furnace and found out this third pipe was nothing more than an air duct, bringing air back in, mixing it with the air that's being pushed through her furnace for her to breathe. Only 3 feet away from the furnace exhaust. Now, here's the bummer. There are 17 million trailers or manufactured homes out here in the world. All of them since 1975 and 76 are produced mandatory with that intake 3 feet exactly away from the furnace exhaust. Would you put your baby or someone you care about 3 feet from any toxic exhaust? Guess what? HUD did. And who got HUD to do that? That's the question. Who lives in manufactured mobile homes? Humble folks, right? Not the elite, not the 1%ers. In fact, those who live in mobile homes are the 12% of the 99%. So what's the purpose of them violating deliberately this safety code and putting that intake 3 feet away? Can you tell me? The breeders and eaters, let's get rid of them. Who said that? Oh, it's the #1 dictum on the Georgia Guidestones, isn't it? Am I crazy or what? Thank you, I'm crazy. Anyway, gassingamerica.com, Gassing Utah. Oh, just a side note, then I'll be done. Back here, See those two beautiful little girls? They died in Layton 5 years ago. They were accusing the exterminator for his rat poison outside. Do you remember that case? I was in Orrin Hatch's office at the very moment that this was coming out in the news, and my phone rang, and on the phone was a reporter translator that does a lot of work for those gentlemen downtown in the gray building and in the white tower behind it. He said, Brother Rogers, turn on your TV. They're about to announce the death of this child in Layton. Please turn it on. For some reason, my heart tells me you need to see this. I said, well, I'm sitting with Orrin Hatch on my right and J.J. Brown on my left. I can't turn on 13. He said, they're at your house. I said, when hell freezes over. I'm in D.C. He said, well, you need to see it. He says, my heart tells me you got to see this. So J.J. turns his computer around. He says, it's probably on the web. Every report that was already being published on the web accused the man of poisoning the girls with this poison. There was one report out of all of them that, in addition to accusing him, it indicated that the family had called the fire station twice because their carbon monoxide alarm had gone off. I turned to Orrin right there. I said, Orrin, it's another case like Clay Christiansen, the tabernacle organist. It's another case like this family in Manti. It's another case like many cases I've now dealt with. The fire department told the family, open your doors and windows, and when we get there, we'll test. Well, by the time you get there with your doors and windows open, what are you going to measure? Clean air. The family were assured their house was safe. They were told twice in 2 days, your home is safe, go back in. The next night, the second night, the first baby fails. Nowhere were they ever tested for carbon monoxide. When I finally got home, I got drug into the case, and I overturned that case. You never heard the truth on the news. Anyway, who is the people pulling this crap off? Who wants to get rid of you and the poor?
Thank you very much. You know what's exciting about this guy? Is that if we had a meeting like this, there's his story all over this state. There's people having these same things, folks.